He was the police, his badge, promised rescue, his eyes promised ruin. Welcome back, my crimson hearts. This is Lichen Tales, where love burns beneath the moon. Tonight's story isn't about heroes or villains. It's about the man the city trusted, and the woman he couldn't let go. His badge promised rescue, his eyes promised ruin, and before the night ends, one of them will break the law that keeps them apart. If you're drawn to stories where duty collides with desire, where justice tastes like sin, and every heartbeat feels like a confession, make sure to like, subscribe, and send your hypes to keep the sirens burning through the night. Now, let's step into the dark. The rain came down in sheets, washing the city into a smear of blue lights and sirens. Adrian Cade had driven this route 100 times, but tonight the streets felt different. Too quiet, too watchful. The call came in as a disturbance. Possible assault, nothing out of the ordinary. He almost didn't stop. Then he saw her. The beam of his flashlight caught a shape slumped against the brick. Wrists bound, skin streaked with rain. Head lifted just enough for him to see her eyes. Recognition hit before logic did. Every heartbeat after that sounded like a countdown. "Stay with me," he said, but his voice broke halfway. She blinked once, lips forming his name like a confession. Adrian. He dropped to his knees, tore at the cuffs until metal scraped his palms. The badge at his chest felt heavier than the gun at his side. He lifted her, felt the tremor in her breath. The fight still alive somewhere beneath the shock. Inside the patrol car, the heater hummed, the space filled with the scent of rain, blood, and something familiar he hadn't smelled in years. Her. She tried to speak. He pressed a finger gently to her lips. "Don't. You're safe now." But she flinched at the word safe. Her eyes said otherwise. At the hospital's back entrance, he hesitated. If he logged her into the system, the past would surface with her. His career, his clean record, his carefully built walls, gone. So instead, he drove past the emergency bay and kept going, the city lights fading behind him. She stirred again. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer. He only looked at her through the reflection of flashing lights fading in the rearview mirror. For a second, the line between protector and sinner blurred into something neither of them could name. By the time they reached his apartment, the rain had stopped, but the air was electric. He carried her inside, laid her on the couch. When she tried to sit up, his hand brushed hers, accidentally, then deliberately. The silence between them tightened, thick as smoke. She looked at the badge clipped to his belt, then up at his face. "That's supposed to mean, I can trust you," she whispered. He met her gaze, voice low, rough. "Not tonight." The distance between them vanished. An impulse, a collision born of everything they shouldn't feel. His breath was unsteady near her ear, words breaking against her skin. "Tell me who did this." Her reply was a ghost against his throat. "You already know." And with that, the promise of rescue turned into something darker, something neither the badge nor the law could undo. The city had barely slept when Adrian filed the report that never happened. No victim, no witnesses, no trace of her name. Just another rainy night. He should have felt guilt when the file vanished from the database, but all he felt was a pulse in his jaw and the echo of her voice whispering his name. The badge on his desk looked like a dare. She woke just before dawn, tangled in his spare blanket, eyes flicking across the unfamiliar room. When she saw him standing in the doorway, she shrank back. Instinct first, memory second. "It's still me," he said. She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the gun on his hip, the badge on the table, the lie he'd wrapped her in. You lied to the system, she finally murmured. I had to. No, you wanted to. The air between them thickened. Every heartbeat said what neither could. He poured her water, hands steady, but slow. She watched him the way you watch a fire, half drawn in, half afraid of getting too close. When she reached for the glass, her fingers brushed his. The contact lingered, deliberate, quiet, far too long. Why me, Adrian? Because they'd bury you again. And what will you do instead? His answer came low, almost a growl. Whatever it takes. The room seemed smaller after that, walls closing in with the weight of what they weren't saying. She stepped past him toward the door. He caught her wrist, not roughly, but enough that she stopped. I can't stay here, she whispered. Then you'll die out there. Maybe that's better than what this is. He released her slowly, his touch sliding away like heat fading from metal. She didn't move. Neither did he. Then she turned, and the look she gave him wasn't fear anymore. It was the memory of something unfinished. She crossed the space between them without a sound. His breath changed. Hers followed. The air cracked, charged with the kind of nearness that blurs right and wrong. For one suspended moment, they didn't breathe. They just existed, inches apart, hearts making the only noise in the room. He was the first to break it. I can't protect you if you keep running, and I can't survive if you keep saving me, she said. Her voice trembled on the edge of defiance and want, the kind of tremor that can ruin a man who believes in order. He stepped back, fists tight at his sides, forcing control into every muscle. Get some rest, he said, but the way he said it sounded nothing like mercy. When she lay down again, the night swallowed the room in quiet heat. Adrian sat by the window, watching the rain return, knowing the report was gone, the evidence erased, and the line between duty and desire already crossed. The precinct smelled of burnt coffee and suspicion. Adrian could feel it the moment he walked in. Eyes following him, conversations cutting off too fast. Internal affairs had already been in his office. His drawers weren't quite closed, his files not in their usual order. Someone had touched his life and left the scent of judgment behind. He closed the door, sat, and stared at the empty folder where the report should have been. The one he'd deleted. It was gone, completely, like it had never existed. But the login records told another story. Someone had tried to restore it at 3 a.m. When he came home that night, she was waiting by the window. The blanket had slipped from her shoulders, the city light tracing her silhouette in restless gold. You shouldn't have gone back there, she said. They're already looking for me. I told you it would happen. He took a step closer. And yet, you're still here. She turned, eyes sharp. Because leaving means they win, and because you still don't know the truth. The words hit harder than any accusation. She began naming names. Officers he'd trusted, detectives on the take, a missing evidence truck tied to narcotics and payoffs. Each word pulled another thread from the clean image he'd spent a decade building. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked. Because I needed you to choose me over them first. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, with everything they weren't saying. She was standing close now, close enough that he could feel her breath tremble when she spoke. They think I'm dead, Adrian. He swallowed hard. Then let's keep it that way. And what are you going to do? Find the file that proves you're alive, and decide what I'll destroy to keep you that way. Her hand brushed his sleeve, a single movement that felt like a promise and a threat at once. His pulse stumbled. Hers didn't. The air between them throbbed with something raw, unspoken, unstoppable. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she stepped back just enough to make him follow. The distance between them became its own kind of gravity, pulling, denying, daring. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, unsteady. "You keep saying you want the truth, but you don't know what it costs," he answered without thinking. "Then show me." The night that followed wasn't gentle. It was the sound of walls cracking, the smell of rain through an open window, the taste of regret waiting at dawn. Whatever line had once separated them was gone. By morning, the missing file wasn't the only thing out of place. The lieutenant's office reeked of stale smoke and politics. Adrian dropped the folder on the desk hard enough to scatter papers across the floor. "Why is this case sealed?" The older man didn't look up from his mug. "Because some things stay quiet if you want to keep breathing." Adrian leaned forward until the edge of the desk bit into his palms. "She's not a thing. She's a witness." "No," the lieutenant said, finally meeting his eyes. "She's leverage." Something in Adrian broke. The next second was a blur. Chair overturned, mug shattering, a hand at a throat that had once given him orders. The lieutenant's voice rasped out a warning he didn't hear. By the time he stepped out of the office, his knuckles were red and the badge on his chest felt like a lie carved in metal. He drove home without turning on the radio. The city looked different now, its lights a map of everything he no longer believed in. When he opened the apartment door, she was there, barefoot, standing in the half-dark. The look on her face wasn't surprise. It was knowledge. "They told you," she said. He nodded once. "I didn't want you to find out like that." Her voice cracked in the middle, and the sound went straight through him. He should have been angry, but all he felt was exhaustion and the gravity that always pulled him back to her. She took a step closer. The apology in her eyes wasn't spoken. It lived in the way her hand hovered near his jaw, the way the space between them pulsed with what words could never mend. He didn't step away. Couldn't. The argument between them happened in silence. Breath against breath. Blame turning to need. The air heavy enough to bruise. What followed wasn't forgiveness. It was surrender to the truth that they were both already compromised. Later, as the storm rolled over the city again, Adrian sat by the window, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Outside, the sirens kept their rhythm. Inside, the world was quiet enough for him to realize that whatever this was, love, obsession, ruin, it had already become his weapon. They left before sunrise. The rain hadn't stopped, only softened into mist that smeared the streets silver. Adrian drove the unmarked sedan with the windows cracked just enough to keep the windshield from fogging. She sat beside him, hair tied back, wearing the kind of quiet that could hide 1,000 thoughts. They were posing as smugglers this time. Nothing heroic, nothing clean. Their contact was a mid-level informant who trusted no one with a badge. It meant hours in close quarters, waiting, pretending, breathing the same air until pretense started to fray. She kept glancing at him, studying the reflection of his face in the side window. "You look like someone who's already decided what he'll sacrifice," she said. He didn't take his eyes off the road. "You'd be right." A red light caught them. The silence stretched. She reached forward, adjusted the radio dial, though it wasn't on, her hand brushing the back of his. It wasn't an accident. He felt the spark travel up like a current. She looked at him then, steady, testing. "Still think you can keep this professional?" she asked. "Trying," he said. "Try harder." Her tone was sharp, but her eyes betrayed something else. fear disguised as defiance. He saw it, and instead of easing her, he matched it with calm that felt like control. The informant's warehouse loomed ahead, its windows blind, its gates half open. Adrian parked in the shadows. "Stay behind me," he said. "I'm not a rookie." Then you know why I said it. Inside, the meeting dissolved fast. Voices rising, a weapon drawn too early. In a flash, she was pressed against the concrete wall, his arm barring her from the danger rushing in from the doorway. Shots cracked, echoes swallowed by the empty space. When it was over, one of the men lay bleeding. Another fled. The smell of gunpowder and adrenaline filled the silence that followed. She was shaking. He turned to her, hands hovering inches from her arms. "You hurt." "No." He didn't believe her. The tremor in her breath said otherwise. He caught her gaze. "Next time, you listen. I had it under control." "You almost didn't." The words came out rougher than he meant, more confession than reprimand. She stepped forward until the heat between them returned, sharp and dangerous. "I don't need you to save me, Adrian." "Too late," he said. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them pulsed, half relief, half hunger, something that lived in the space after gunfire. When she finally exhaled, he felt it like contact. They drove back in silence, lights of the city sliding over their faces like ghosts. The mission was a success on paper, but both knew they'd crossed another line that had nothing to do with work. That night, as the rain started again, Adrian lay awake, listening to her steady breathing from the next room, and realized the worst part. The danger outside didn't scare him anymore. The danger inside did. The suspect sat across the table with a smile that didn't belong in a police station. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, cutting shadows into his face. She was supposed to question him first. Adrian stood behind the glass, listening through the intercom. The man leaned forward, cuffs clinking. "Didn't think you'd crawl out of that alley, sweetheart. Guess the right people didn't finish the job." Her hand tightened on the pen. "Name them." He grinned wider. "You already know their names. One of them's probably watching you right now." The line landed like a blade. Adrian's hand hovered over the door handle, knuckles white. When the man kept talking about the night she disappeared, about what she'd begged for, Adrian snapped. The door slammed open. The suspect's smirk vanished as Adrian yanked him up by the collar, voice a low snarl. "Say her name again." The room froze. 2 uniforms rushed in, pulling Adrian back. The suspect laughed even as he was dragged out, blood on his lip. After the paperwork, after the captain's warning, the precinct emptied. The building's hum quieted into night. Adrian found himself in the evidence room, alone with the noise in his head and the stench of dust and solvents. He leaned against the metal shelves, breathing hard, trying to find the man he used to be. Footsteps behind him. She didn't speak, just closed the door. The lock clicked. He turned. Their eyes met. For a second, neither of them looked away. "You can't keep doing this," she said softly. "I know." "Then stop." "I can't." The words scraped out of him. She came closer, anger and something else burning through the distance. Her hand found his wrist. He didn't move. "Why do you care this much?" she whispered. "Because they still think you're theirs to break." She stepped closer. The air between them throbbed. Her voice was barely sound. "And what am I to you?" His answer didn't come in words. The silence that followed was rough, tangled with everything they hadn't said in months. It wasn't gentle. It was human, messy, desperate. A collision of guilt and relief. of wanting to disappear into the only person who still felt real. When she finally drew back, both were shaking. The smell of rain drifted in through the cracked window. She touched his cheek. The gesture small, trembling. "You can't save me like this." He looked at her, eyes dark. "Then tell me how." Neither of them had an answer. The room stayed quiet, except for their breathing, half confession, half punishment, until the lights flickered out. The morning brief felt like a countdown. She was wired under plain clothes. A tiny transmitter hidden beneath a clasp Adrian had checked twice before forcing himself to step back. "Keep the line open," he said. "I know the drill," she replied, but her eyes stayed on his, a fraction too long. The van smelled of coffee and tension. Adrian watched the signal pulse on the monitor while her voice came through the headset. Steady, practiced, slipping easily into the role of someone who didn't know fear. Then the tone in her voice changed. The officer she was baiting, the one who'd brokered half the department's dirt, had stopped speaking. Footsteps echoed, the mic brushing fabric. "Adrian?" He heard the whisper, faint and breaking through static. "You still there?" "Yes." "Say the phrase." Nothing. Just breathing. Then a muffled thud. Protocol said to wait for backup. He threw the headset aside. By the time he reached the warehouse, his weapon was drawn, and the radio was still screaming his name. Inside, two figures struggled near a stack of crates. The corrupt officer's gun clattered across the floor. Adrian's boot sent it sliding away. He didn't remember hitting the man, only the noise, the flash of movement, her voice gasping his name again. When it was over, she was on the floor, shaking, the transmitter crushed in her palm. He pulled her up, checked her for blood, found none. "You're fine," he said, but his voice didn't sound like his own. Sirens approached. She looked at him. "They'll see what you did. I'll handle it. You hit a cop, Adrian." "I hit a threat." He handed her his badge, the metal streaked with someone else's blood. "If they come for me, give them this." That night, paperwork turned into silence. He didn't sleep. She sat across from him in the dim apartment, knees drawn up, watching the city blink outside the window. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "I told you I'd protect you. And now you've stained everything for it." He looked at his hands, red at the knuckles, trembling. "Then let it stain," he said. The quiet between them grew heavy again, a mix of guilt and the kind of closeness that shouldn't exist between two people on opposite sides of survival. The city hummed beyond the glass. Inside, the air felt too warm, too human, too dangerous. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "You saved me again." Adrian didn't answer. He just stared at the badge lying on the table, the metal catching the faint glow from the streetlights. It didn't look like protection anymore. It looked like ruin. By the next morning, the story had spread through the precinct like smoke. Adrian's desk was already stripped bare when he arrived. Two internal affairs agents waited by the captain's door, jackets dry, expressions rehearsed. "Detective Cade," one of them said, sliding a folder across the table, "you're relieved of duty pending investigation." He didn't argue. He just nodded, unpinned the badge from his chest, and set it beside the folder. The sound it made was small, but final. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It followed him down the steps, into the car, across the bridge. Every drop drummed the same word in his head: done. He drove without a plan until the phone buzzed once. A single text. Room 14. The motel sat on the edge of the highway, its neon sign half dead. The kind of place people chose when they didn't want to be found. She opened the door before he knocked. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you." The air smelled of rain and cheap soap. She looked smaller, without the armor of anger she usually wore. He looked heavier, every line in his face etched by something he couldn't name. "They took your badge?" He nodded. "Then what now?" "I finish what I started." She shook her head. "You can't win this. They'll bury you next." He stepped closer, voice low. "Then let them dig." Lightning cracked outside, throwing brief light across the room. She reached for him, hesitant at first, then certain. The movement wasn't about comfort. It was about survival, about claiming one moment that belonged to neither duty nor fear. The storm pressed against the window while they stood there, close enough to hear the rhythm of each other's breathing. Everything about the world outside fell away. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper against the noise. "If we keep going, there's no coming back." "There never was," he said. The rest of the night unfolded in fragments, words half-spoken, choices made in the dark. By dawn, the rain had stopped. His badge lay on the nightstand, a relic of a life already over. She traced the outline of it with her fingertip. "So this is what it costs?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "No, this is what it's worth." Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and faded. Inside, the silence was absolute. Two fugitives from their own pasts, sitting at the edge of something that felt like freedom and ruin all at once. By the next morning, the story had spread through the precinct, like smoke. Adrian's desk was already stripped bare when he arrived. Two internal affairs agents waited by the captain's door, jackets dry, expressions rehearsed. "Detective Cade," one of them said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're relieved of duty pending investigation." He didn't argue. He just nodded, unpinned the badge from his chest, and set it beside the folder. The sound it made was small, but final. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It followed him down the steps, into the car, across the bridge. Every drop drummed the same word in his head: done. He drove, without a plan, until the phone buzzed once. A single text, room 14. The motel sat on the edge of the highway, its neon sign half dead. The kind of place people chose when they didn't want to be found. She opened the door before he knocked. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you." The air smelled of rain and cheap soap. She looked smaller, without the armor of anger she usually wore. He looked heavier, every line in his face etched by something he couldn't name. "They took your badge." He nodded. "Then what now?" "I finish what I started." She shook her head. "You can't win this. They'll bury you next." He stepped closer, voice low. "Then let them dig." Lightning cracked outside, throwing brief light across the room. She reached for him, hesitant at first, then certain. The movement wasn't about comfort. It was about survival, about claiming one moment that belonged to neither duty nor fear. The storm pressed against the window while they stood there, close enough to hear the rhythm of each other's breathing. Everything about the world outside fell away. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper against the noise. "If we keep going, there's no coming back." "There never was," he said. The rest of the night unfolded in fragments, words half-spoken, choices made in the dark. By dawn, the rain had stopped. His badge lay on the nightstand, a relic of a life already over. She traced the outline of it with her fingertip. "So this is what it costs." He looked at her, eyes steady. "No, this is what it's worth." Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and faded. Inside, the silence was absolute. Two fugitives from their own pasts, sitting at the edge of something that felt like freedom and ruin all at once. The motel television glowed with static, the kind that fills a room when words aren't enough. She sat on the edge of the bed, a small black recorder in her hands. Its blinking light looked like a heartbeat. "I found it in the box they left for evidence," she said. Adrian looked up. "What is it?" "Proof." She pressed play. The first voice was his lieutenant's. Cool, measured, unmistakable. She saw the drop. "Get rid of her before she talks." Then another voice. Lower, rougher. His own. "Understood." The air changed. Adrian froze. "That's not real." "It's your voice, Adrian." They spliced it. You know what they can do with recordings. Her eyes were glassy, unreadable. "Then why does it sound like you meant it?" He moved closer, careful, like approaching a wild thing. "You think I was part of this?" "I think I don't know what's true anymore." The argument cracked open like gunfire, words thrown faster than either could catch them. Guilt and fear collided, every accusation striking old wounds that hadn't healed. "You hid me," she said, voice shaking. "You destroyed the file. You said it was to protect me, but maybe it was to bury me again. Don't twist this. I don't have to." He slammed his palm against the table. The recorder jumped, hit the floor. The voice, inside, still whispering lies. "Everything I did was to keep you alive," he said. "And what if I was already dead to you the moment you chose them over me?" The room fell silent except for their breathing, ragged and uneven. She stepped forward, close enough to feel his pulse hammering in the space between them. "Tell me it's fake," she whispered. "It's fake. Say it like you believe it." He swallowed hard, eyes burning. "It's fake." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she reached for the recorder, pressed stop, and let it fall onto the bed. "I don't know if I hate you," she said, "or if I just hate that I still feel safe when you're near me." He laughed once, a hollow sound. "That makes two of us." Whatever came next wasn't gentle. It was gravity, inevitable, wordless, born of fury and the ache of what they'd lost. When it was over, the tape lay forgotten, their breathing uneven in the dark. Dawn crept through the blinds, slicing the room into fragments of gold and shadow. She rolled the recorder between her fingers, voice soft. "This could end both of us." Adrian looked at her, eyes tired but sure. "Then we end together." The red light blinked again. Proof, promise, or curse, and neither of them reached to turn it off. The storm returned the night he decided to move. No warrant, no orders, just a half-dead conscience and a list of names that shouldn't exist. Adrian loaded his weapon, checked the comms, and looked once at the small recorder on the table, the one that had already damned them both. She appeared at the door before he could leave. "You weren't going to tell me," she said. "You're not coming." "I already am." He didn't argue. There wasn't time for it. They drove through the industrial district in silence, the city lights blurring into streaks of white. The warehouse at the edge of the docks waited like a mouth full of secrets. 3 floors, 10 armed men, and the truth locked somewhere inside. When they stepped out, she slipped the locket from her neck and pressed it into his hand. "If something happens, burn it." "Nothing's happening," he said, but he pocketed it anyway. The raid began with precision. 2 quick breaches, 1 clean arrest, and then everything unraveled. Someone inside had tipped them off. Gunfire shattered the quiet. Shouts filled the stairwell. Adrian moved first, dragging her behind a wall as bullets tore through the plaster. "Stay down. You think I'm leaving you now?" Her voice was sharp, steady. They fought their way up, step by step, until the last door burst open to reveal the lieutenant, weapon raised. The betrayal hit harder than the noise. Adrian fired first. The man went down, still reaching for the badge pinned to his coat. Silence followed, brief, deafening. Smoke curled in the flicker of emergency lights. Adrian turned to speak, but she was gone. He searched the building, shouting her name, the echo mocking him back. Outside, rain washed the blood into rivers along the concrete. Then he saw it, the locket lying open on the asphalt, the tiny photo inside streaked with water. He picked it up with shaking hands. The chain was broken, the clasp twisted. She'd run or been taken. Either way, she was gone. The first sirens were already closing in. He slipped the locket into his pocket and walked into the rain, the badge heavy in his other hand. By the time the backup units arrived, there was nothing left but shell casings, 2 bodies, and a ghost the city would never find. Adrian left the precinct for the last time with a cardboard box and the weight of a dozen unspoken apologies. His name had been scrubbed from the roster before noon. The city that once called him a savior now crossed the street when they saw him coming. For weeks he lived in borrowed rooms, chasing rumors that led nowhere. The locket never left his pocket. At night, he replayed the raid in his head. The flash, the smoke, the moment she vanished. Each memory ended the same, with silence. Then, one evening, silence broke. He was walking past the old bridge when a voice came from the dark. "You still carry it." She stepped out of the shadows, wearing black, rain slicking her hair against her face. Not a victim anymore. Something sharper, freer, and infinitely more dangerous. He stared at her, unsure if she was real. "You're alive." Mostly. They stood like that for a long time, the city humming beneath them. "You disappeared," he said. "I had to. You made too much noise. I thought they killed you." She smiled faintly. Maybe they did. The space between them pulsed, familiar and foreign all at once. "You're different," he said. "So are you. I lost everything." "No, Adrian. You traded it. For me." Her eyes didn't soften. They studied him, the way a survivor studies fire, appreciating the warmth, but never forgetting the burn. He moved closer, voice low. "Why come back?" "Because the job isn't finished." She reached into her coat and tossed him a flash drive. "That's the rest of it. The files they hid, the list of every name that ordered my disappearance. You wanted the truth. There it is." He caught it, thumb tracing the metal. "What's your plan?" "Expose them. Burn the rest. Start over." "And me?" "That depends on whether you're still the man with a badge or the man I met in the dark." Lightning cracked overhead, the sound rolling through the river. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist, gently. "Tell me why you really came back." Her gaze flickered down to his hand, then back to his face. "Because I can't tell if I want to save you or finish what we started." The rain came harder. He let her go, but she didn't move away. Their reflections blurred together in the puddled asphalt, 2 ghosts of what they'd been, standing on the edge of everything they'd destroyed. Neither of them spoke again. The bridge lights flickered once, and in that flash, he realized something terrifying. Redemption and ruin now looked exactly the same. The morning came without color. Adrian sat alone in the cheap motel room, the flash drive glowing faintly in his palm, like something alive. Every file, every name, every signature, proof that the people sworn to protect the city had been feeding it to its predators. He'd already written his confession. It filled 12 pages, in tight, even handwriting, dates, places, orders he'd followed, and the ones he'd disobeyed. When he finished, he folded the papers neatly and slid them into an envelope. The rain had finally stopped. The city outside looked scrubbed clean, almost innocent. He walked through the precinct doors one last time. Conversations died as he passed. The officers who had once stood beside him looked away. At the end of the hall, the glass door of Internal Affairs waited. He laid the envelope on the desk. "Everything's in there," he said. "Every file, every name. You want the truth? That's it." Before they could answer, she appeared in the doorway. No disguise, no hesitation, just the same look she'd worn the night they met again under the bridge. Fearless. "You don't get to do this alone," she said. "I already did." "Then you'll need a witness." The room filled with motion, agents rushing in, phones ringing, the whole building waking to the sound of its own corruption tearing loose. Within an hour, the first arrests began. Adrian and the woman watched from the hallway as the men who had buried her were led out in cuffs. The city outside was alive with sirens again, but this time they sounded different, like a reckoning. He felt her beside him, still and quiet. "You know what happens next," she said. "Yeah, they'll come for you too. They already did." He looked at her, really looked, memorizing the calm in her eyes. "You don't have to stay." "I know," she said, "but I will." When the last of the lights flickered out in Internal Affairs, they walked away together. The streets were empty, the dawn a pale blur over the skyline. At the edge of the bridge, she stopped. "You saved the city," she whispered. "But you ruined me." Adrian's voice was low, steady. "No, I freed you." She looked at him once more, and then they both turned away from the sirens, from the smoke rising behind them, from the ghosts of who they'd been. By the time the sun climbed over the river, they were gone. No badge, no record, no trace. Weeks later, rookies at the precinct whispered about them. The detective who confessed, the woman who vanished with him, the case that rewrote the department's history. They called it a myth, but every night when the rain returned, someone swore they heard a man's voice in the static of the radios. Calm, distant, impossible. He was the police, and she was the reason justice learned how to bleed.